Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Missing Link. I'm your host, Shane Buell, and I've been away for about a month. It's been a very busy month since the Kirk event. I'm not going to call it an assassination or a shooting because I don't believe that is what it is. So, Tracy and I have presented the fake death theory before on her channel, but I'm going to elaborate more on it now. I'm calling this theory the pseudocide theory, which is the crime that you would be charged with for faking your death. Now, some legal issues can arise from this, which would include insurance fraud if you try to collect life insurance, obstruction of justice if you mislead law enforcement, or false identification if you try to create a new identity. So now these charges basically all include jail time and fines. However, insurance fraud could come with restitution, obstruction of justice could come with probation, and identity fraud could be a possible felony charge. Now, of these, insurance fraud and false identification would be easy to avoid just by not doing so. However, when faking one's death, obstruction of justice would be harder to avoid. Either they are going to have to mislead the law enforcement, which includes the FBI, or law enforcement and FBI are misleading us. And I do believe that to be the case because, as we all know, the FBI's official story has at least 33 holes in it. All right. So I have already been aware of this theory and reported on it before. I wouldn't have reported on it if I didn't actually lean in this direction. And while there is some supporting evidence for this theory, there is almost no disproving evidence. You can try to disprove this theory all you want, and it actually only strengthens it. All right. So I did come across an article in the UN's review called The Weird Theory of Kirk's Fake Death. And this is by Laurent Guilleneau, and it was just published on September 25th of this year. Now, they do have about 9 or 10 bullet points, and it's very well organized. And so I'm going to use these points and just add my own information to it. The first point he brings up is the bursting shirt. I think from almost any angle, you can see the unusual shirt movement in Charlie's shirt. Now, there has been some movement vector analysis that was done on these videos, and it does seem to show that there are no bullet tracks, there are no bullet trajectories, and the only anomalous evidence that is found is the shirt puffing up like it did. Now, 99% of people are using that vector analysis in support of the exploding microphone theory, but there are some quote unquote holes in that theory as well. I can disprove the exploding microphone theory by the fact that there is no burn marks on his shirt. Normally, when we saw like with the exploding pagers, there would be, large holes in the clothing and even in the person themselves, as well as like burn marks around the area. And we don't see that. And there is even another angle where Charlie is lifted off the ground from behind the table, and you can clearly see that his lapel mic is actually still attached. Now, this evidence leans more towards the pseudocide theory, where there was a potential Hollywood squib or a blood bag that was placed underneath the shirt and is popped with either compressed air or CO2. Now, we do have a video that shows what that looks and sounds like. And I want you to pay close attention to the sound that it makes, because the first time I heard this, I did think it sounded like a paintball gun or some sort of CO2 cartridge. All right. So, yeah, at first I thought that sounded like a paintball gun or a CO2 cartridge, but it turns out that these Hollywood squib blood bags actually do make the almost identical sound to a paintball gun or CO2 cartridge. The next point of evidence that I want to get into is the blood and the clotted blood, according to this article. Now, this article references another part of Werman's video where there was an expert who had said the blood flow was inconsistent with the reality of a gunshot wound in that part of the body. The blood would be very thin as opposed to chunky and coagulated like it appears. And moreover, it appears the blood is coming up out of his shirt collar. Now, there have been several medical related experts who have given their testimony as to how the blood doesn't look thin enough.
I worked in Jacksonville from 85 through 88, and we averaged about a gunshot wound every day. So it would leave you 3 or 4 days during the week to have nobody shot, and then the weekends would make up for it. There would be like 3 or 4 gunshots that come in, and we would go get them in the helicopter. Now, I did see the kind of bleeding that goes on with gunshot wounds. I would say that the guy's already dead over a day. Okay, because blood doesn't come out in chunks. It squirts out, possibly, arterial blood, especially. But it doesn't do that. It doesn't come out in chunks. This is definitely some trickery going on, and this looks exactly like it does in the movies. This blood coming out in chunks, I ain't buying it. Nah, that's blood that's been bagged up and is ready for a show.
And it does show that the blood that comes out is almost too uniform, too dark in color, and there is no glossy spots on the blood either. Whereas, if it was a real life blood flow that was coming out, it would be reflective in some areas and it would be more opaque in some areas and less opaque in some areas. And what we see is just too uniform in color, and it's actually too chunky, too coagulated in appearance. And it does also seem to splash off of the shirt. So there are some frames where it touches the shirt, and then some later frames where it like bounces off the shirt and the shirt is not stained. There's even two frames at the end of that clip which show that the blood goes backwards. So I'm not going to show the blood flow here, but I did want to point that out, and I will link you to that. So now the third point that I want to bring up is what this article calls the slipping wound. A frame by frame viewing reveals that the neck wound is a video compositing addition. And we have seen this and reported on this before on Tracy's channel as well, how the wound actually moves. But I'm going to go ahead and show this here because it only shows the wound and not very much blood at all. So one thing you see here is that as he moves, the wound actually does not move with him. It's either some sort of augmented reality projection or some sort of post-production editing or CGI that has been added. However, there's a very heavy possibility that this could have been done in real time with, like I said, augmented reality, some sort of projection, and or holograms. All right, now the fourth point that is brought up in this article is not enough blood. And this was the big one for me. This is what actually did it for me. There is not a drop of blood pouring out from Charlie while he's carried away, and zero blood spatter on the ground. This is inconsistent with real gunshot wounds. Now, a lot of people would say that his heart was stopped instantly, and that's why we only saw the single gush of blood and then nothing else afterwards, because his heart was allegedly stopped. Well, I don't care if your heart's beating or not. In this case, they lifted him with his feet elevated above his neck, which would cause the blood to pour out of the open wound, regardless of a heartbeat or not. So let's take a look at just how much blood was actually there at the scene. So you can see the platform on which his chair was originally seated has a little bit of blood on the corner. It's only a few inches across, and it doesn't really seem to appear on the ground or the chair or very many other things. Here's a little bit better view of the grass. You can see that the grass is virtually unstained. And then there is also a slight smear of blood on this, what appears to be audio equipment case. There's just not enough blood here for this type of wound. Even if the heart was stopped, you would expect that the blood would continue to pour out of the wound, especially when his legs were elevated upon being lifted. But we don't see any of that here. And we also don't see it when he's being carried away to the car. There should be at least a drop of blood, if not an entire trail of blood. Now, I personally have been in a car accident where I left behind about 10 times as much blood as we saw at UVU here. And I have also cleaned up after a fatal gunshot wound where I would estimate there to be 100 times as much blood as was left at this scene. All right. So now the next thing that they list in this article is the eyewitnesses saw Kirk being shot in the chest. Now, we have heard several, perhaps crisis actors, who explained that he did get hit in the neck. And there were probably people that really did think that's what they saw. But there was a lot of people in the crowd who also gave testimony as to him being hit in the chest. And those are being suppressed or scrubbed from the internet. However, I do have one here from Josh Barlow, who was standing in the front row. He says in a tweet that he was there in person at the front. He's the one wearing the gray hat. And yes, he told people he got shot in the chest because that's what he saw. Now, there could have been some sort of augmented reality on top of the blood bag that caused some people to see the blood come out of the neck, but I don't believe that it actually came from the higher up on the neck. You would expect most of the people who were there to have seen the same thing. However, we do have a relatively large mix of testimonies that range from the chest to the neck. And you may be familiar with the kid in the red shirt who actually was trying to give a testimony to Adam Bartholomew during his live stream, but he was interrupted by a Turning Point employee. Someone actually did get in contact with him, and this is what he said. He said it was UVU, and he had told us not to talk to the media. He was asked, was he with Turning Point or was he a college student there? And he said, yes, he was with Turning Point, not a college student there. So it appears that Turning Point was already prior to that interview, just minutes after the shooting. It appears that Turning Point was telling their people not to talk to the media. I do believe that was to probably get the story straight between the neck testimonies and the chest testimonies. They were just trying to get their story straight. Even though his testimony does match the official story, they were told beforehand not to talk to the media, which is super sus. All right. Another point brought up by the article is that Kirk is still holding the microphone. Now, when he gets shot, his hands do go into what would be considered a decorticate posture. And while it does look very convincing, he actually does not let go of the microphone. So if he was in a true decorticate posture, he would actually lose his muscle tone and would actually let go of the mic immediately. However, he continues to grip the mic for a second or two afterwards. Now, it's very convincing, yet not realistic. Had he lost actual muscle tone in his body, the mic would have dropped instantly. All right, so here's all the available camera angles that we should have to choose from. However, the ones in red are still unavailable to the public at this time. Now, these arrows in green are available to the public and they do appear to be legitimate videos. There's the one from inside behind the window that shows someone on the roof. There's also the angle from Charlie's left, which was captured by Samir Massey and posted to his TikTok. It has since been taken down, but there are copies of it out there. There was also another one, which was a live stream from Adam Bartholomew, who was up on the walkway. However, his live stream was actually cut. So this was his live stream, and just before the shot, just like 1 second before, you can see this glitches out, and then it continues glitching out as well. Now, that actually did cut his live stream, but he continued to record to his device. Now, I'm going to actually show you a clip from Jason Goodman, who explains why that may be.
I noticed that Adam's live stream had cut out. He was live streaming for like 19 minutes, and then suddenly he's talking to these guys on the roof. And 1 second before the shot is fired at Charlie Kirk on his live stream, it completely cuts. But yet, right after that shot, we have this thing show up, which flies into the frame any second here. So maybe it's gathering intelligence about the site. Now they've done something, and this thing comes and does an orbital over the crowd. I don't see any flapping. I see a little bit of image compression around the sides of it, but it does this really smooth orbital right over the crowd. Why would a bird be interested in this chaotic human activity? That's a reconnaissance drone, I think. I contacted Adam Bartholomew, the guy who created the Life is Driving YouTube channel and shot that footage. And I spoke to him on the phone. I asked him what happened with your live stream, how it cut out and everything. And I think they were doing electronic warfare. When Adam Bartholomew's live stream cut out, I believe he was subject to a Bluetooth low energy exploit. There is an IT security company called Oligo, which not long ago published this report about a known zero-day exploit in Apple's Bluetooth stack. They've called it Airborne. It's a wormable zero-click remote code execution exploit that, now there's been an update since this. There was an update to iOS a few days after September 10th, but this exploit was still possible to execute against an iOS device on September 10th. And what this means is if you have Bluetooth on your iPhone or your iPad or any iOS device, which Adam Bartholomew was using an iPad and he was using iOS devices to record all of this, a Bluetooth low energy attack can overwhelm the device with Bluetooth requests and cause it to crash or do all kinds of unexpected things. So this is called an airborne attack. And ironically, I believe that type of Bluetooth exploit was launched from one of these drone aircraft to stop anyone from live streaming or recording the event. But Adam Bartholomew outsmarted them because he had his remote cameras, which were connected through Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. He also had them connected by a USB wire.
All right. Now, I don't necessarily agree with Jason on everything, especially since the premise is based on this actually being a murder scene. And that is not what I think it is. I think pseudocide was the only crime that may have happened here. But he does actually bring up a good point that I do agree with. There were drones that were seen there, and many of the devices were probably taken offline. I don't know how many live streams that were actually taking place at this time. The only ones I'm aware of are the one that Adam Bartholomew was streaming and allegedly one that TPUSA was streaming, but there's basically no public record of that. So if anyone does have access to the TPUSA live stream, Just let me know in the comments and or send me an email, which I'll link it below. These might be the only devices that had Wi-Fi and Bluetooth disabled and were not vulnerable to the attack. So the idea of a drone conducting a Bluetooth exploit that would take these devices offline might explain why we got so few angles from so many people. If there was 3,000 people there in the crowd and most of them had their devices, you would expect to see more angles of this event than we have seen so far. I do believe that the devices were taken offline by this Bluetooth low energy attack that Jason explains. And that's why we've only seen a few, like a handful of videos that come out from this. But the ones in blue are these super viral angles that we all have probably seen, but they all have some evidence of tampering. The front view from Becker's Hale's Instagram is the one that is most likely the one that everyone has seen. It's the super viral close-up video, but that is also the most altered video. There's all kinds of anomalies in that video, such as the letter disappearing from his shirt, the microphone cord disappearing, his eyebrows staying in one spot, but especially the wound movement. So that video is inadmissible as evidence, except for the fact that it's evidence of tampering. And then the other one from Charlie's right side is another view that we have seen, which is also tampered with. It's the one that has the chair going through the platform. This is not artifact compression. This is actually some sort of post-production editing and or artificial intelligence. This is obviously tampered footage. You can see that the chair falls right through the platform, and the way that it bounces and falls onto its back is not the real physics. This here is the real physics. You can see he slides it along the platform, it bounces off of the side of the table and actually falls on its left side. This physics not only looks more realistic, but is probably the actual physics. And the chair actually does end up in the position which we will later find it when the camera guy goes to grab it to reach the camera. And Tracy and I did cover that in a previous video, which I will link in the description below as well. The article goes on to say that the second category of facts which contradict a real death has to do with what happened immediately after the shooting. And I do agree with that. However, I want to touch on some points that occurred. One of the anomalies that happened before the event was the fact that Kash Patel actually gutted the Utah FBI leadership prior to the Charlie Kirk assassination. So Kash Patel fired the legendary special agent in charge of Utah's FBI division just a month before she would have led the ongoing manhunt. The special agent in charge in Salt Lake City, Mehtab Syed, was pushed out of the role in August, despite former agents saying she was absolutely the best in the Bureau. Associate Deputy Director J. William Rivers, who works for Patel, and Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino reportedly told Syed that she wasn't a good fit for the office. Another anomaly is that Timpanogos Regional Hospital had just recently named Andrew Zenger as its next chief executive officer. Zenger officially began his role on August 25th, overseeing all aspects of operations and care delivery at the Orem facility. So that raises the question as to why they would replace the Utah FBI as well as the CEO of the hospital that Charlie was taken to. These two changes happened within 3 to 4 weeks before the event occurred. All right, so now the article goes on to mention that there was no ambulance. Kirk was immediately carried into the black SUV, although there were ambulances on campus. And even if there weren't, such a procedure is inconceivable. And I do agree with that as well. Now, the next anomaly, according to the article, is that there was no crime scene. Never do we see state police or FBI agents taking control of the crime scene, as should have happened. And minutes after the shooting, we see a man later identified as Kirk's video technician disassembling the video camera behind Kirk and stepping on Kirk's chair to reach it. A few days after the crime scene was thoroughly cleaned up without any FBI inspection. The best explanation why the scene was not treated as a crime scene is because it was not a crime scene, but more like a movie set. Werman also shows clues of a production team filming frightened spectators while avoiding filming Kirk after the shot. All right, so now the next video that I'm going to show are the rehearsed actions of Charlie's security team. I do have their names showing here, but that's not because I think they are accomplices to murder. I think at most they are only accomplices or accessories to pseudocide, and that depends, like I said, on whether Charlie actually tries to collect life insurance or misleads law enforcement. I don't believe he was misleading law enforcement. I believe law enforcement was misleading us. And as long as he doesn't assume another false identity afterwards, then he's technically not in violation of any of those laws. So it could be possible that he's not even guilty of pseudocide itself. However, I would consider the FBI to be guilty of fraud as well. So yes, we do know their names now, but their names are not as important as it would be if this was framed in the framework of an assassination or murder. Now we do see TPUSA camera guy here, you know, also having a rehearsed spot that he goes to. So he instantly runs off, and then he's seen right up there on the rocks where he can get a good filming angle. Now, this isn't the only person who did this. Here's another TPUSA camera guy who's behind the tent and he can't even see what's going on, but he knows exactly, as soon as it happens, he knows exactly which way to turn to catch the action on camera. This is obviously rehearsed as well. We also have a third camera position here, which is seen not to actually follow Charlie, but actually continues to point towards the people running towards them. This was actually filmed by a lady who was in this position, that black woman in the brown. And then as soon as the person runs by, she runs away. You can see she's standing right there, and she didn't turn the camera towards the action. She actually was filming the people who were running past. Now, you can also see that there's not a single drop of blood on the ground. There's not a single trail of blood. You would expect to have an entire trail of blood leading from the tent all the way to the car, and none of these guys appear to have blood on them either. It's very anomalous. You would expect, even if the heart was stopped, when they elevated his legs, it would dump the blood out the hole. And here's one more angle that shows that there is no blood on the pavement. You can see there's still no blood. And as they round this corner here, you can see the camera guy up there who assumed that position. He knew exactly where to go to get the shot he was looking for. All right, so now I want to show a video of the guy who was actually asking Charlie the question at the time when the event occurred. And you'll see him here in the foreground there, actually getting ready to rehearse his moves. Now, he's on camera in front of everyone. He looks a little agitated, but there you see him putting his hands on his head, which is exactly what he does when the scene occurs. Now, we're going to show that again one more time, but you can see him like kind of pacing back and forth, and he puts his hands up on his head, and that's exactly what he does during the event as well. So we're going to see him where he puts his hand on his head, just like he practiced. And there you have it. All right. And one of the final points that this article makes is the dummy corpse. The counter argument to the fake death theory would be if we had at any time seen Kirk's corpse. However, as a matter of fact, we did see the hands of a corpse in a rather morbid video of Erica leaning on Kirk's casket, filmed at close range. Although this is meant to convince people that they have seen the corpse, many people express doubts at the orange, dummy-like hands that we see. And by the way, you must have noticed that there was no funeral service for Kirk. The 5-hour Memorial TPUSA mega show was not a funeral service, and Kirk's parents did not even attend. So now I do have a video of this that I want to show you, and I want you to pay attention to the size of the hands. Yes, they look yellow and waxy, but look how small these hands are compared to Erica Kirk's hands. Her hands look almost the same size, if not bigger, than what we're led to believe are Charlie's hands. However, in this image, you can see that Charlie's hands actually are significantly larger than Erica's. I did include 2 images here so that you can see that on the top image, it looks like his hand completely covers hers. And in the bottom image, you can get a pretty good idea of the hand sizes. So this article concludes that they think there is a strong body of evidence that Kirk's death was staged. Incidentally, this would make sense of Kash Patel's awkward remark, especially addressed to an evangelical Christian by a Hindu.
To my friend Charlie Kirk. Rest now, brother. We have the watch, and I'll see you in Valhalla.
Now, Kash Patel had originally posted on Twitter that he was going to expand the investigation due to the number of conspiracy theories that were out there, and there was a lot of evidence that was not addressed by the FBI. So Kash had originally made this tweet about expanding the investigation, but now it appears that the FBI is trying to get a quick wrap and do an open and shut case and convict Tyler Robinson. However, I don't think that Tyler Robinson is going to be convicted. There's too many holes in the story, and there's too much evidence that disproves that he shot anything at all. But let's hear what Kash has to say in his own words about the current status of the investigation.
Simple answer, in my opinion, is social media is wildly out of control, and there's too much clickbait in this country. And one of the things I highlighted at Congress in my testimony last week was if we want to protect our youth, we got to get more involved in social media and online platforms, because that's where the folks, the assassins of this world, get radicalized. That's where they're the lone wolf actors in general. And so we have to get after that problem set. And I asked for Congress' help in doing so. But speaking of Charlie Kirk, who was a very dear friend of mine, and then I was tasked with leading the nationwide manhunt to find the perpetrators involved, of course we were going to use every resource we have to find every single person involved, and the investigation's still ongoing. And this is how we got Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin, so fast. Our investigation is very much ongoing. But we've also, Armstrong, in an unusual thing, put out publicly more information as to what we found, because it is of such public importance. The flip side of that is the social media people get involved and they come run with their crazy conspiracy theories, and I don't work for them and I don't respond to them. My duty is to the American people. If there was anyone else involved in Charlie Kirk's murder, you can look at our record.
So that's a big flip-flop on the part of Kash Patel, who said they were expanding the investigation and looking into all these alternative theories. And now he comes out and says that the biggest problem that they're having is these conspiracy theories on the internet. So I find that to be a bad sign.
One thing, and you can spot whether or not you're standing in the middle of a psyop. And that one thing is, if the opinion that's coming out needs people to be silenced, it's a psyop. There are psychological operations in play.
Wow. So if you can't question it, if you're supposed to just go along, it's a psyop.
Yeah, and if people have to be silenced or publicly shamed because of their information, and they're not telling people the sky's falling. They're not saying crazy shit. Mm-hmm. They're just saying basic stuff, and they need to be silenced. That is a psyop, no matter what.
All right, so this is quite obviously a psyop that's being perpetrated on the American public and the world, and there's plenty more evidence to support this theory, but I'm just going to leave it at that. I may report more on this in the future, but there are several other stories that also need our attention as well. So I don't want to dwell on this topic too much, but when I do have more information that is actually relevant to the theory of pseudocide, whether proving or disproving that theory, then I will actually make another update in the near future. So I'm going to leave you guys with this, which is a quote from Donald Trump talking about Charlie Kirk.
I got to know him very well and saw immediately that Charlie was actually a master builder of people.
He is a master builder.
That Charlie was actually a master builder of people.
What does that mean? Freemason master builder. The master builder is a title of great respect, honouring members who have contributed significantly to the advancement of Freemasonry by their dedication and hard work. The master builder is a symbol of excellence and dedication to the craft, exemplifying leadership qualities, dedication to the service and devotion to the cause of Masonry. That shooting was staged. You saw all the clues left for us. You saw the hats on the table, 3 of them, 4, 7. That's 11 times 3, it's 33. Patel said that they had the man in custody for 33.
In 33 hours. 33 hours.
And if you listen to the numbers all added up at the court case for Tyler Robinson.
To the judge.
Calling case 251-403-576. State of Utah versus Tyler James Robinson.
33. I don't know how much more obvious we can make it.
All right, so there you have it. This is just some of the supporting evidence for the pseudocide theory of Kirk's fake death. I challenge anyone out there, whether you believe or disbelieve, to either prove or disprove this theory. I was originally a non-believer, and I tried to disprove this theory, but the more I tried to, the more I started leaning in this direction, because every single piece of new evidence, the more that it actually supports this theory. Just like the vector analysis, which is being used to support the exploding microphone theory, actually also supports this theory as well. And you'll find that in the future, the more evidence that comes out, it will probably corroborate with this theory, although 99% of people probably believe in the exploding microphone theory at this point if they're not still stuck on bullet trajectories and things like that. So I will keep you guys updated in the near future, but I'm also trying to move on to other topics. So I'm going to try to leave this one where it is unless some sort of bombshell evidence comes out short of the reappearance of Charlie Kirk. But if that does happen, then just be aware that I told you so. All right. That's all for today. Stay tuned for more, and I'll see you guys soon.